If you've seen just one episode of Dragon Ball, you would be able to tell pretty clearly that fighting is a focal point of the series. It's a pretty obvious observation. It's been like this ever since the start, and as the series continues on, more and more fights happen, with greater spectacles each time. But as that happens, something that is known as power creep takes effect. You may know this from video games and other stories too. In the simplest terms, as a story continues, people will grow stronger and stronger. This applies to both antagonists and protagonists. It's not exclusive to Dragon Ball, obviously. It happens in a lot of shonen and anime or manga in general. And like I said, you'll even see this in video games, or even comic books or movies, TV shows, pretty much anything that's in fiction. Let's look at a video game for example. Dokkan's a good option since it's Dragon Ball themed. Let's put it in layman's terms too so anyone understands. A while ago, they released Super Gogeta, who was one of the strongest cards in the game. This was way back in 2016. Now, even after he got buffed, there is dozens of cards that are better than him. I mean, how else would they get people to want to summon for cards? They just need to keep making stronger and stronger ones to keep things interesting. And the same happens with Dragon Ball itself. Whenever an arc ends, or a villain is defeated, a newer, more powerful antagonist will show up during the next arc, and they'll be defeated using some stronger techniques. Usually the hero is going to prevail, or at least one of the heroes, and they do so by getting stronger in some way. But over time, this sort of snowballs as characters face stronger and stronger villains with each arc. And as these arcs continue, it kinda gets out of control. And that's where we get to Dragon Ball specifically. It's gotten a little out of hand recently. Why is that? Well, let's discuss why I think it's been getting out of control, and why power creep may be bad for the story as it goes forward. So this isn't really anything new. This has been going on since early Dragon Ball. Like I said, it's pretty important to any piece of fiction, and pretty much unavoidable. But it wasn't really an issue back then. Let's take the King Piccolo arc and the 23rd World Tournament for example. Against King Piccolo, he was pretty much unstoppable. Goku and Tenshinhan couldn't really defeat him that easily. But in the next arc, which is a couple years later, Goku's a lot stronger. He had been training with Kami for a few years after all, and he is an adult now. And it's pretty sensible. He learned from fighting his last villain, trained a lot during those few years, and got stronger. And it wasn't too excessive. It's not like he went from defeating King Piccolo to blowing up planets with a single finger. But the issues really did start to come in during Z, and I'll get to it a bit later, but I think Super's the biggest problem. Let's start with the Saiyan saga, just to use as another example. In the second half of the Dragon Ball manga, or DBZ as it's known in the anime, the first villain to appear is Raditz. Now by today's standards, people could literally cough and kill him like that. That's how weak he is in comparison, but back then, he was the strongest villain by far. He was so strong that Goku even teamed up with his arch nemesis Piccolo. That's how dire things got, and they only killed him by killing Goku in the process. He was multiple times stronger than any other villain in the past, including the same Piccolo that fought him. Definitely a fearsome opponent. Following this, everyone trained for a year into the Saiyan saga, and believe it or not, in that year of training a lot of people actually surpassed Raditz, meaning they multiplied their own power by a huge factor. Let's use Piccolo and Goku as examples, using the manga and Daizenshu 7 as references for their power. We don't have a true reference for Piccolo's power in the 23rd World Tournament, but we know he's stronger than King Piccolo, who was given a power level of 260 in Daizenshu 7. Against Raditz, it's noted that Piccolo is around 400 in terms of power, when he's not charging up an attack. So for a rough estimate, let's say in the 23rd World Tournament, he was around 250 or 300, going up to 400 once he's fighting against Raditz. Over the 5 years since the tournament, his power only grew by 100 or so, but in the year that they've been training for the Saiyans, he got nearly 10 times stronger, with 1/5 of the time that he had between the last two arcs. Daizenshu 7 lists him at 3500, around a 3100 increase in power within that 1 year. And keep in mind, during this year, he spent some of his time trying to train Gohan too, so it wasn't even all spent training himself. Of course I can go on and on with Z, but this is just one example. During that one arc alone, they surpassed Raditz by multiple times, training basically the same way that they did before. But I'm not here to criticize Z. The only reason that I'm actually covering this is to show everyone how long this has been around for. It's nothing new, I just think it's gotten worse in Super. That last example will look really tame in comparison to what happened in Super. This didn't happen just in the later arcs of Super, it started right at the beginning, with Battle of Gods. And before someone in the comments tells me that it's technically part of Dragon Ball Z, I know, but just hear me out. It's fair for me to count it as part of Super because, I mean, there's literally a retelling right in the story. But enough of that tangent, let's get to the actual issues here. When Beerus came around, he was so strong that they said even fusion wouldn't be enough to defeat him, implying that if Goku and Vegeta were to fuse into Super Vegito once more, even he wouldn't be able to do anything against Beerus. But you know who did actually give Beerus a challenge? God Goku. And this is where the root of the problem begins, all with God Ki at the center. This is a really clear and obvious implication that Super Saiyan God Goku is multiple times stronger than Vegito, at the very least. Because if Vegito wouldn't have any effect on Beerus, how would Super Saiyan God Goku have any effect if he was weaker than Vegito? So in Battle of Gods alone, Goku surpassed the fusion that he was part of in the past arc, which is a really crazy feat to have right away. I mean, just think about it for a second. You guys all know what Buu was capable of after he absorbed Gohan. He was the strongest person anyone had faced. His power was simply insane, and Vegito was stronger than that, especially Super Vegito, basically being the strongest character we had seen by that point. And just a few years later, that Vegito was surpassed by Goku, just Goku alone. And this is pretty tame in comparison to some of the stuff that happens later on. Later on, we'll be getting more into how this actually affects the story and how this can be bad going forward. But for the time being, let's go through some more examples showing how bad the power creep is really getting. Frieza is another really good example. Sure, they explain it by him being a mutant, but really, it's still weird. Like, I don't care what explanation they have for it, it's still pretty absurd how strong he grew. A few arcs back, he lost to Super Saiyan Goku, and this was Goku before he even mastered Super Saiyan. It was a much weaker version of Goku with a less refined transformation. And with a few months of training, Frieza then gets golden and somehow ascends to the level of Super Saiyan Blue. So with just a few months of training, he somehow goes from being weaker than Super Saiyan Goku on Namek to being comparable to a stronger Goku, one that got stronger since Battle of Gods and with a stronger form. That amount of power creep is just absurd, even with the explanation of what Frieza is. And this is where one of the big issues starts coming in. Really, it started kind of with Battle of Gods and the Buu saga. But it starts to get even worse here. If you've been part of the Dragon Ball community for any amount of time, you've probably heard the term the Goku and Vegeta show, which is what a lot of people call Super. The reason people say that is because there's a lot of focus on only Goku and Vegeta, and not a lot of other protagonists. And while I don't fully agree, I can kind of see where everyone's coming from. At this point, Goku and Vegeta are simply so strong that it leaves pretty much everyone else in the dust. I mean, look at Resurrection F again for example. Everyone's just fighting the Frieza Force fodder. The humans, Piccolo, and even Gohan. And then by the time Frieza comes around, they pretty much can't do anything. It's like they were in the movie out of pity, because all they did is fight some nameless soldiers, a couple one-off henchmen, and then they just went into the sidelines. Goku and Vegeta were so far ahead that they needed to handle the situation, and it was kind of like this in a lot of Super. And remember before how I said Goku in Battle of Gods surpassed Vegito? Yeah, it happens again. In the Tournament of Power. When Vegito showed up in the Zamasu arc, he was one of the strongest people there. Sure, Zamasu was immortal, but Vegito's power was absurd, and he was actually able to do some good damage against Zamasu. The Tournament of Power happens about a year later, and right away, they imply that Zamasu is already surpassed. When Jiren is heavily suppressed, right when Goku first fights him, it's said that he's the strongest foe that they've ever faced. And he's not even at his full power, not even a fraction of his full power, and he's already ahead of Zamasu. And we all know later on, he ends up losing to Goku. Well, almost. But when Goku was in the completed version of Ultra Instinct, he was enough to actually overpower Jiren. So let's use some simple logic. A heavily suppressed Jiren is stronger than fused Zamasu. Full power Jiren is much stronger than that heavily suppressed Jiren. And Ultra Instinct Goku is stronger than full power Jiren. Likely not by a huge margin, but enough to get him on his knees. And that means once again, Goku individually surpasses fusion, and he only gets stronger and stronger going forward. And this doesn't just apply to Ultra Instinct Goku, you could even go back during the other fights and see that Goku got stronger, meaning that you could realistically say a tired out Blue Goku is stronger than Blue Vegito from the last arc, which is just insane. But I think I've shown enough examples. I can go on and on with how crazy the examples are getting. We could talk about Android 17's growth, Gohan's growth, and of course Broly's growth, plus a lot of other characters that fell to power creep. There's just so many examples, but I think I've pretty much gotten my point across. In Super, it's gotten really bad with the power creep. But I think what worries me most is what we saw in the Moro arc. Now that Goku has full access to Ultra Instinct, and he's considerably stronger than he was in any previous arc, this poses some issues with the story which I think we might be seeing going forward. And we're already starting to see it. Even Vegeta's starting to fall behind, the guy that was Goku's right-hand man basically, the only one that was even close to his power. But now, even he's starting to fall back. And it's just one of the many symptoms of power creep in Dragon Ball Super. Something that's been happening for a while now, and if it continues happening, Goku may simply just get too far ahead of everyone. So I mentioned before in Resurrection F that a lot of the characters were kinda irrelevant in terms of power. If you guys have followed me on Twitter, you probably know I really hate Resurrection F, and that's just one of my many issues with that movie and arc. But again, if you follow me on Twitter, shameless plug @SaladSaiyan, you would know that I also really like the Moro arc. But despite all my love for that arc, it has the same issue as Resurrection F. It kinda makes the other fighters seem irrelevant. Simply put, everyone's just too far behind. I mean, this was inevitable at some point. There's no real way to keep up with Saiyans realistically. But the gap is just so large, it makes it so that they don't do anything. They're just relegated to fighting people that don't matter. Like, just go back and look at the arc. The only members of the Dragon Team that really did anything of value is Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, and Piccolo. And even for Gohan and Piccolo, the best they could do was face 7-3. Once Moro came in, again, everyone's useless. Even Android 17 with his insane growth in the last arc, he's just there, I guess. He's just kinda hanging around there, while there's this insanely old magician running around with Ultra Instinct. That's how crazy it's getting. Even characters that were really strong in the last arc like 17 and Gohan, their insane power creep is disregarded, because the power creep towards the next arc makes everyone else so much stronger. Even Vegeta eventually gets left in the dust, despite learning a brand new technique that no one else has. He comes back to Earth, fights Moro for a bit, and then gets tossed into the dirt once Moro powers up. And the only person strong enough to fight him was Goku. And that's what's kind of worrying me about this power creep. Goku is just so strong by this point. I know, he's the MC. The main character is usually going to be the strongest and get all these brand new techniques. It's pretty standard. But I think there's a point where the MC gets too far ahead of everyone else where it gets weird. Not that I expect people like Chaozu or Yajirobe to come in and get a lot stronger. But I mean, like I said, people like Piccolo, Gohan, even Vegeta. People who have seen some insane growth over the series, both in terms of power and technique. It's fine leaving some of the smaller side characters in the dust, but I'm starting to get worried that these other guys will get left behind too. And the only way to fix it for them is more power creep, get them to become really strong somehow. And it's nothing really new for them either. Piccolo fused with Kami to catch up to everyone, briefly making him the strongest protagonist at the time. Or in the Buu arc, Gohan goes through a ritual and gets ultimate, not only catching up to everyone, but surpassing them too. And yeah, maybe sometimes it's okay, it's explainable, like I mentioned with Piccolo. He fused with Kami, that was explained on Namek. Namekians confuse and get stronger, and Piccolo merging with Kami makes perfect sense. They were once the same person, so them getting back together is nice. But there's a certain point where people are so far ahead where you need ass pulls to make them stronger. If you don't know what an ass pull is, well, it's what it sounds like. It just means someone pulled a power out of their ass. I know it's a weird term, and I don't know where it came from, but it's a pretty widely used term, so I guess we gotta stick with it. Because realistically, how else are you supposed to make everyone catch up to Goku at this point? Sure, we can definitely see that soon. Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, anyone. Maybe they get some weird techniques that gets them closer to Goku. But with the huge power gap between them, it wouldn't really be realistic. He's just too far ahead at this point. So, what's the way to fix this? How are we supposed to make anyone get close to him? Well, I've seen a few suggestions within the community. This isn't the first time I'm bringing this issue up, it's just the first time that I'm mentioning it in a video. But I've talked about this with friends before, and seen other discussions about it. That's how big of a problem it's getting. It's being pretty widely discussed, and people don't really know what to do about it. Of course, the main solution is up to the writers. But I don't think making a solution is the issue. I think the main issue is that there may be no solution. We may be past the point of no return. Again, we could always use ass pulls to make everyone stronger. But then where's the nuance in the story? Where's all the hard work that people can do to get stronger? It defeats the point of everything. Really, the only solution I can think of is have Goku gone for one of the arcs. Not permanently. Just long enough where we see one of the main villains being fought by people on Earth. We could probably get some nice character development while we're at it. And as much as I don't personally like it, another solution, new transformations. Like Piccolo, for example. What if he got his own god forms that help him get on par with Goku? Or Gohan, further evolve an ultimate to get stronger and stronger as he's been doing. Or as we've seen in the Granola arc, Vegeta training with Beerus, learning new techniques to get stronger. Although we'll have to wait and see what that actually entails. But really, besides those two suggestions, there's not much that can be done. Especially by now, Goku's just too far ahead. Power creep has gotten so bad that it's caused this. This massive gap between Goku, Vegeta, and everyone else. Will it actually end? Only time will tell. But we don't have any idea of how that'll happen. So I guess for the time being, we just have to wait it out and see, and hope for the best. But in the meantime, we could discuss, and that's the point of this video. So, what did you guys think about the points that I brought up in this video? Do you think power creep's gotten to a point of no return, or could we fix it? And if we did fix it, what would be the best solution? Leave all your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. It is a discussion video after all, so let's start discussing. Anyways, if you liked the video, be sure to drop a like. It helps the channel out and it'll let me know you guys like more videos like these. If you haven't already, why not subscribe, as well as hitting the bell icon and get notified about any future uploads on my channel, including more videos like this one. As always, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.